welcome Head of Innotribe, Kevin Johnson.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this, our 8th Innotribe at Sibos. This year, we wanted to take you on a journey. We wanted to take you on a journey with our speakers to look at the how of innovation. Not the what, but the how. How can we learn from adjacent industries? How can we advance by learning from those who are already innovating? We'll be hearing from industries, the military, medical research, shipping, technology companies, talking about how they are innovating inside their industries, and then we're going to translate that into lessons learned for our industries. We've been inspired this year by history to build this, our own Innotribe coffee shop. Because if you look back in history, one of the most innovative times was the late 18th century, the Enlightenment. And this was all possible due to the humble coffee bean. Back at the early 18th century, disease, cholera, was rife amongst society. People were dying left, right, and center. And the brightest minds of the day were trying to understand what had happened, how you could solve cholera. There was a doctor in London called Dr. John Smith who realized that by boiling water, you killed the bacteria that caused cholera. Suddenly, water was safe to drink, everybody was saved. But the problem was nobody likes the taste of water. So the first great innovation of the age happened. And if you add hops and barley to boiling water, you get beer. Suddenly, a whole society was switched onto beer. Beer was seen as the healthy choice amongst society. Everybody was drinking this. Nobody was dying from cholera, but you had a whole society that was pretty much permanently drunk. And while you may have some absolutely amazing ideas while you're out drinking with your friends, when you sober up in the morning, they might not be quite what they first cracked up to be. And at this time, something else was happening. Traders from the East were bringing coffee beans to Austria, to London, to Oxford. And in 20 years, the number of coffee houses in England alone went from 1 to 3,000. Coffee was a hit. You could go into a coffee bar in London, and for 1 penny, you could drink all the coffee you wanted every day. But more importantly, it brought people together to exchange ideas, to exchange theories, to exchange news. This is what led to the Enlightenment, this bringing of people together, giving them a stimulant as opposed to a depressant, that leads to great ideas. In the meantime, as centuries have gone on, coffee houses have increased. So from the early days of the Enlightenment through to the more luxury and splendor in 19th century Vienna, coffee has played a central and pivotal role to society. The securities industry, the insurance industry started in coffee houses. Lloyd's List started in Lloyd's Coffee House in London as part of the Enlightenment. So we can trace our very roots back to this stage. And there's a new revolution going on, a fintech revolution, which owes its very existence, I would argue, to coffee. The first meeting between two founders is invariably over a cup of coffee, whether it's at a conference like this, whether it's at a meetup group, or whether it's at a high-end coffee bar. And when you're a small company, you don't have an office, where do you take your first funder? Well, you take them to a high-end coffee shop. This is where fintech starts, and that is what brings us here today. Here to Toronto, here to our coffee shop. We want you to come, we want you to enjoy our coffee, we want you to have conversations, not just with our speakers, but amongst yourselves. We truly believe that by bringing everybody from across the financial industry into this place, giving them the stimulant of coffee, but the space to have those conversations, great things can happen. And what you will find, heard quite a lot, is one simple phrase which sums up collaboration. And that phrase is yes and. Yes, but closes down a conversation. It goes nowhere. Yes, but means I've heard you, but I don't really like what you said. Yes, and means I've acknowledged you, and I'm going to build on top of what you're saying. And that's what Innotribe is about. That's what we want people to do. We want people to come together, to listen, to be inspired, and to collaborate. Yes, and I think is a great way to introduce our next speaker as well. He's solving some of society's most pressing and critical issues by building on top of what other people are doing. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, ladies and gentlemen, the Deputy Director for Financial Services for the Poor for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Costa Peric.
Good morning, good morning. I see lots of friends around, so I'm really happy to be here. Indeed, I represent the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, our Financial Services for the Poor program, which is all about connecting the 2 billion people who are today unbanked on the planet to a proper, adequate financial system. I'm also representing some private sector partners, which I'll introduce later, and who have seen their own business benefit in joining this endeavor. So we all live in a loop, a financial loop. The people in this room, our loop is quite large. I can send you money using our bank accounts domestically. I can send money internationally. It all happens at the speed of light or almost. So we are all part of a quite large financial loop. But there are lots of people in Africa and Asia whose loop is much, much smaller. For example, here is Grace in Uganda. She has a mobile phone, and she subscribes to a mobile money system, which is in itself quite an innovation. So she can send money as you send a text message to her family, and that works quite well. But the problem is that that loop is very small because basically the people who she can send money to need to be part of the same financial service provider. And not obviously everyone is part of that. The other problem is that if she works, she receives her paycheck, she typically receives it in cash because she doesn't have a bank account. And her employer moves money from the bank account, so she has cash. If she wants to pay her utilities, like electricity or water, she will also have to revert to cash because, again, she doesn't have a bank account and the utilities can be paid only using a bank account. So her loop, Grace's loop, financial loop, is very, very small. And as a result, it adds to her hardship. It's actually quite expensive to be poor. If you actually want to pay your utility, it may actually be a trip, a day trip to some place where you go with your cash and pay that. So very, very difficult and increasing her hardship. So how do we solve this problem? How can we make Grace's life better? Well, essentially by enlarging her loop, by including her in a larger financial system. And so today, this is yet to be done. In Africa and Asia, we see a lot of good systems being in innovation, notably mobile money. But this larger loop of interconnecting every financial service provider together is yet to be done. So at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and with some private sector partners, we're happy to announce today the availability of an open source software that we're putting as a global good today, as I speak, on GitHub, that allows interconnectivity and interoperation of various financial service providers together using retail payment, instantaneous real-time payment system that this software implements. The software is called Moja Loop. Moja in Swahili, it means one. Moja Loop is the software that allows all of these providers to be interoperable. We are putting it in open source today. Open source, as you know, means that everyone can use this software for free. And what we hope to achieve is that financial service providers, many of whom are in this room, adopt this software and make the life of Grace in Uganda much simpler by connecting them to a very broad financial loop. Here are the partners we've worked with to build this software. Ripple, Dwola, Crosslake, Software Group, Modusbox, they represent quite top-of-the-line fintech innovation. They have brought all of their skills and expertise into this. But as I have mentioned, they see the benefit and value of them of contributing to financial inclusion, so they have contributed to this open software as well. So my call to action to you is the software is available as we speak on GitHub. It's your software. We have built it for you, for the financial service providers, for the industry here at this table, to simplify your endeavor, because we know that sometimes technology can get in the way. So we have removed the technology issue out of the way. You can use it. If you're a fintech company, you can use it to upgrade your technology. If you're a financial service provider, you can use it to integrate with others. If you're an infrastructure or market infrastructure provider, you can use it to deploy digital financial services. It is there for you. I challenge you to look at it, inform yourself, get on board, and help us make the life of Grace and 2 billion other people better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Costa. If we could just go back to that last slide, there's one other thing that Costa actually forgot. Tomorrow, there is actually a workshop, so you can actually come and get your hands dirty with this. So we're actually really pleased to be partnering with the Gates Foundation to host this workshop in room 201D, and there'll be a couple of workshops there tomorrow afternoon where you can actually go along and get your hands on the software and actually hear and work with Costa. And if you want to know more, we've actually got a space where the Gates Foundation can be met outside. So enjoy the coffee, come for the conversation with Costa. Moving on, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. She came with us at Sibos in Boston and was one of the most amazing speakers it's been my privilege to hear. I didn't get to see her live this year, and I'm truly delighted that we'll be able to this year. Ladies and gentlemen, your next speaker on the Innotribe stage, Admiral Michelle Howard.
Kevin. Well, good morning, and thank you, Kevin, and Sibos for inviting me to speak. So I'm going to talk to you about pioneering journeys, and I think I can consider myself a little bit of an expert in this because I did actually once receive an award for being a trailblazer. But if you're looking at starting something new, and Costas just talked to us about starting something new, then whether or not you're a male or female, or believe there's something different or special about you, this may have some value for you. So when I first came into the Navy, women going on board ships was new. Certainly women going into command of ships was new. And I had been in the Navy, I would want to say about 12 years, and we'd come out of Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I had 4 shipboard tours under my experience when I went to work ashore for the first time in a policy shop. And I found myself getting these additional duties. I was asked to be a spokesperson for the Navy. I was asked to do a lot of briefs, and it had nothing to do really with my day job. And I was starting to get frustrated that I was given all these extra things to do because I was the first among many women who could represent or speak to these unique issues. And so one day I called my mother, and I was just venting. I've got my full-time job, and then I've got this second job, all these expectations. And being a good mom, she listened to me, and then she said, you need to stop. She goes, you had better embrace this because it's not going to change. And if you don't embrace this, you better quit. And I was in shock. She goes, no, you're the first. You're the first. There's no one ahead of you. And so these additional expectations are not going to change. And so you have to learn how to deal with it, make it part of your life, or you're just not going to succeed. So, once I got over the anger that I felt like my mother wasn't in my corner, I took her advice seriously, and I thought, yeah, there is nobody ahead of me. I'm on this journey, this career journey, where there's not a roadmap. And yet, I realized I'm not the first one to be a pioneer. In fact, I spent most of my life growing up in Colorado. There is a history of pioneers in my country and the West, and it was an arduous undertaking for these human beings to decide to leave the urban environment of the East, sell off most of their possessions, put them in a wagon, and travel across on a journey where very few people had been before them and had to learn new skill sets, everything from how to shoot to how to farm. And I said, if I just look at them and figure out why they were successful, I could probably be successful. So I started reading about my own country's history, and I came to this conclusion of why I think the pioneers were successful. They committed to the journey, they traveled light, they had stamina, they had a sense of humor, and then they stayed connected. So let me walk you through my thesis. So let's start with committing to the journey. One of the first pioneers I ever read about was Elizabeth Gear in 1847. She's in the wagon, her husband, 2 kids, and they are just about halfway across the country. They're past that Missouri River point. And then she suddenly decides she's done. The wagons get up in the morning, and she tells her husband she's not going any further. And he's in shock. So he decides to load the kids in the wagon, hitch the horses up, and he leaves his wife there and starts riding out with the rest of the wagon train. So partway down the road, the wagon trail, he starts to feel remorse. He grabs one of the horses and puts his son on a horse to ride back and find his wife, who he's left in the middle of nowhere. Elizabeth Gear, though, had suddenly figured out that being left in the middle of the nowhere wasn't a good thing, and she had been following on foot the wagon train. As she saw her son ride off on the horse, she came down from the hills and confronted her husband. Elizabeth, where did you come from? Where's our son? She goes, our son caught up with us, and I was so angry, I knocked him out with a rock. So her husband grabs another horse to go riding off to find their son, who's actually perfectly okay. Elizabeth burns down their wagons. Yes, the journey's done. So you think about it. If you don't embrace and commit to this journey, you will find yourself burning down wagons. I suspect in this group, some people have already burned some bridges. You have got to embrace and commit to the journey. Next slide. Now here's a couple of examples of people in finance who I would consider pioneers who have committed to their journey. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the first female finance minister of Nigeria in 2003. And you think about what it took for her to get to that position, who helped rework her debt for her country, and then became the finance minister again under another administration, and then also started a women's empowerment group. And then we have Kristalina Georgieva from Sofia, Bulgaria, who started off as an assistant professor at the University of World and National Economics, and then grows up to be a EU commissioner for humanitarian assistance, and then ends up being the CEO of World Bank. Clearly, these women committed to the journey. So when you commit to the journey, and you can think about the barriers and struggles these women had along the way, you realize you're going to have a positive attitude. You can't get to the point where you're burning down the wagons. And I thought a lot about this as I continued on my own journey. And thinking, how do you maintain this positive attitude? Well, when I made One Star, I was in when we make Admiral and One Star, we're all provided leadership training, and then we all get coaches. And I thought, what a great question to ask my coach. So I go through my training, I get my one-on-one session, and I'm very lucky. I have a coach who also happens to be a psychologist. We're working through my attributes, and then finally I said, there's days I don't feel the passion. There's days where I don't feel I'm embracing the journey. What do I do? And she goes, oh, Admiral, that's easy. Come in, listen. And I got all excited. I was going to get wisdom. She was, lean in. She goes, fake it till you make it. And I'm thinking, how much are we paying these coaches? But she was right, that you have to commit to the journey. As a leader, you're obligated to project this positive attitude, but you're going to have to inspire yourself some days. And then I thought, maybe it was just that the coach didn't phrase it in a way that appealed to me. And I think about the iconic communicator, Maya Angelou, who said, if there's something you don't like, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. So be positive and commit to the journey. Next slide. Travel light. Oh my gosh. When the pioneers were going across the country, they'd start off packing everything. Grandmother's china, jars of preserves, whatever they needed, coffee, right? Well, as they got across the country, all of a sudden you realize the wagon's getting bogged down, the horses are getting tired, and there are just photographs and stories of across the Oregon Trail, everything that got tossed out of the wagon. Small pianos, that beautiful china. Finally, what you really need is just food. And so I realized it doesn't matter what your pioneering journey is going to be, you had better travel light. And before you even start tying up that first horse, you better do an assessment of what you really need. And today, I don't think it's China, I think it's ourselves. That you have to look at yourself as a leader and say, what mental baggage do I have? And it is time to let it go before you even start the journey, because you better be able to travel light if you want to adapt to a tough environment. Next slide. Developing stamina. There's Mary Walker was a pioneer in Oregon in the 1840s. And this is an excerpt from her journal. Rose about 5, had breakfast, got my housework done about 9, baked 6 loaves of bread, made a kettle of mush, and have a suet pudding and beef boiling. So after another list of a full day of chores, Mary Walker's journal ends with this: 9:00 p.m. was delivered of another son. Stamina. Now, some of you are going to be in shock because you have a hard time getting kids to childcare by 7. Stamina. You have got to have stamina if you are going on a pioneering journey. Now, Mary Walker went on to have 8 children, and a couple of times doctors were present. That did not stop her from maintaining her house and the farm in order. And here's some modern military women who've shown that if you have stamina, you can be successful. Airman Charlene Plant is a survivor specialist, all of 5'3", and teaches other airmen how to survive out in the woods. And she said she had to learn it all herself, how to set snares to catch anything from squirrels and eat whatever she got to live out in the woods. And she's very proud of the fact that she's now one of the few female certified instructors to do this. And for us, as we had our journey on the ground in Afghanistan, we realized we needed women who could work side by side with infantry. These are women who are a female engagement team. Captain Hasselman and her group, had to be able to demonstrate they could do 7 miles a day in tough desert with full rucksacks, be able to shoot at the level of infantrymen, and we had to adapt. This was a new journey for us because we were in an area where we could not access the women unless we had women soldiers. And yet we had to be able to access the populace in order to get to a stable environment. So you need to have stamina when you're going on a pioneering journey. Next slide. Sense of humor. There was a chief of naval personnel, a 3-star admiral who grew up to be actually our chief of naval services, Admiral Borda. He wrote this article in 1989 about the change that was happening in the Navy. We were putting women on support ships. We were moving women into non-traditional roles. And Admiral Borda said this about change. He said, change hurts people's minds like a new pair of shoes hurts your feet. And you have to just work your way through it so that you're comfortable with the change. But if you're the change agent, if you're the pioneer, you probably ought to keep a sense of humor. I was very lucky to meet Captain Winifred Collins in the 1980s. In fact, I received a leadership award that is named after her. She served in World War II. She's one of the first women graduates of Harvard Business School. And when World War II started, the Navy created Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. So she came in as a lieutenant. And at the beginning, for the Navy, we would not deploy women outside of the continental United States. And then towards the end of the war, we realized if we pushed women out to Hawaii, we could free the men up to serve at sea. And so then Lieutenant Winifred Quick, Collins was her name later on when she married, she and 2 of her other friends, Louise Wild and Winifred Love, are picked to be the first 3 women officers to go to Hawaii to set up the administration to help support staff effort for the war fight. So they're very excited. So it's 1944, and then this is the most amazing part of the story, because I'm from Colorado and this has never happened to me. There is a Denver millionaire who hears about these women waves who are going to go to Hawaii. He has a house on Oahu on the beach. He rarely uses it, and he offers it up to them as a place where they could spend their weekends. And it's fully staffed. And so, being smart young lieutenants, they accept. They get to Hawaii. They get to their first weekend. They go to this beautiful house with this wide window view of the beach. And her friends, Winifred Love and Louise Wild, go off to put on their swimsuits. And Winifred Quick is standing in the living room just looking at this beautiful view. And she sees this man coming down the beach in aloha shirt and shorts. And as he gets closer, she goes, "Oh my gosh, I think that's Admiral Halsey." Now, Admiral Halsey was one of the iconic admirals of World War II for my Navy. He ended up being a 5-star admiral and is credited with winning some of the major battles for my Navy. And so as he gets closer, she's pretty sure it's Admiral Halsey. Well, he comes right up to the house. The steward opens the door. He has to come in. She introduces herself. Or she says, "Hi, hello, come on in." And he says, I live down the way. I've seen this house. This is the first time I've seen it occupied. It's such a beautiful house. I know this is very intrusive, but could I see the rest of the house? It's just fantastic. So she says, well, yes, of course. And she asks the steward to get him a drink. And then her 2 colleagues come out and in their swimsuits with little robes over. And all of a sudden, and they're pretty sure it's Admiral Halsey, he jumps up and runs out the door. "I got to go. I can't stay." And they're in shock. They're not sure quite happen. So they decide to enjoy the rest of their weekend, and they do. And then Monday, she's at work, and she gets a phone call from Admiral, who's the chief of staff to Admiral Halsey. And he goes, Lieutenant, quick, were you at this beach house on the weekend? She says, yes. She said, did Admiral Halsey show up? She goes, I think so. He goes, did you introduce yourself? She goes, no, he didn't introduce himself. And the Admiral goes, okay, let me tell you what happened. We have our Officers Recreational Center, and Admiral Halsey goes there Saturday afternoons to think and relax, and he walks on the beach, and he saw the house, and he walked in, and then he saw the three of you, and he came running back, and he gathered up his staff. He gathered up his aide-de-camp and me, and he said, oh my gosh, there's the house on the beach. It's got women in it. Three beautiful women, and their names are Quick, Wild, Love. I think they're spies. I think they're here to put on swimsuits and seduce secrets out of us. I need you to go investigate these women and find out who they really are. So they look into it, and he said, so then we get back to the Admiral, and we go, Admiral, it's good. There's naval officers at the house. And he goes, naval officers? I didn't see any naval officers. They go, no, sir, woman naval officers. And Halsey goes, dear God, not even the Japanese did this to me. So Captain Collins kept her sense of humor and her sense of self. In this picture, she's a captain. She stayed in the Navy and grew up to be the highest ranking woman that we had and in charge of the waves. Now, the reason she's a captain instead of an admiral is because after World War II, my country passed a law that only 2% of the women only 2% of the armed forces could be women, and women could not have the rank of general or admiral. The highest rank they could have is captain, and only one at a time for each of the services. That law was not changed till 1967, allowing for someone like me to go on my own pioneer journey. But if it hadn't been for a trailblazer like Captain Collins and her sense of humor, hard to say I would have been able to find those ruts in the Oregon Trail. Next slide. So you're on this journey, and you get to where you're going, and it's beautiful. It's just phenomenal. And you really are happy and satisfied you went on this pioneer journey. And then you look around and you go, oh my gosh, there's nothing there. You literally have to build whatever it is you're going to build. You have to build your house. If you're on a modern pioneering journey, you're going to build the foundation, and then you're going to continue to build whatever it is. Just arriving is not the end of the journey. Building is part of the journey at that point. And so you continue even after you've arrived to be a pioneer. And then how do you manage to be successful? Because there's nothing there, so where do you get your inspiration from? Next slide. I met a woman a few years ago who was on her own pioneering journey. This is over on the far side is Rear Admiral Aitanu Hotanu. She's the first woman to achieve the rank of admiral in the Nigerian Navy. Now, when she started, she wanted to join the Army. They didn't take women in the Army at the time. She has an architect degree. And so the Navy took her, and she went into logistics. About the time she was halfway through her career, she realized she was the most senior woman as a commander in the Nigerian Navy. And she realized there was no one above her for her to look at. And so she said, I went on the internet, and I started looking, and I came across this woman, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, who was a computer science pioneer. One of the first women to get a doctorate from Yale in mathematics, came into the Navy in World War II, was considered too old at the time, even though she was a volunteer at 38 and underweight, I think at 105 pounds. But the Navy made a waiver and brought her in. And she worked with other mathematicians and is credited with creating the framework that is COBOL and with creating the whole foundation of computer science. This is the woman who created the term a bug in the machine. And goes on to be, in 1969, the first computer science to be the Man of the Year in computer. No, that was the title then. And internationally, just made a tremendous difference in terms of electrical engineering and opening up and creating the basis for computer science. So Itanu reads about Grace Hopper, who became one of our first women admirals, recognized in the 1980s for her pioneering work in computer science, and says, I like her and what she did. And so she cut out this picture of Grace Hopper and stuck it on her corkboard and said whenever she was having a tough day, she'd look up to Grace Hopper, and she just kept going. And she ended up retiring a couple of years as a 2-star. And now in retirement, is taking her architect degree to build low-income, affordable housing for Nigerian people. And so has not stopped her pioneer journey. So when you're out there in the open area, for the pioneers, it was probably a Sears and Roebuck catalog that inspired them. I can get this, I can dream. But for us, look to another community, perhaps, for your inspiration to continue your journey. Next slide. So once you're there and you've built your homestead, then what? Well, I think what we realize is that staying connected with other people is pretty important. So in my country, the quilting bee, once a month, every few weeks, women would get together and make quilts, but I would submit to you, making the quilts was not the purpose of the quilting bee. Getting together and sharing wisdom, how to take care of the family. The women were basically the medical health care, all those tips they would share, how to better get product out of the land, how to take care of their kids, everything. It was an exchange of information. It was the coffee shop, right? And it's not the quilts that's the best product that comes out of this. It's the wisdom. So if you're a pioneer, make sure you stay connected to other specialists who have the same experience set. And it's amazing what you will learn that will get you through and make you successful in the journey. So that's it. Last slide. You're going to be a pioneer? Commit to the journey, travel light, develop stamina, keep your sense of humor, and stay connected. So thank you for your attention today. With that, I'll take questions.
Thank you so much. So if anybody's got any questions, keeping with the sense of humor, we have a microphone that I'm going to throw at somebody. If I take anybody's head off, I'm sorry, but we didn't want to let the Admiral sort of take responsibility for that. So if there's any questions, I can throw a microphone at somebody. We do have stick mics if you're scared. Anybody?
Right there.
Pencil
toss.
How did you choose this career path? What inspired you to follow this direction?
Okay, I will answer that question, but previous. The first person to ask a question, I always think that takes courage, and in my service, our 3 core values are courage, honor, and commitment. So I want to say thank you for asking the first question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it actually started when I was pretty young. I was 12, and I saw a documentary on TV, and I said, I want to go to a service academy. And I was all excited. Went to see my older brother, who said, well, that's fine, but you can't go. Service academies are closed to women, which was true. That was the law at the time. And I couldn't believe him. So I went to my mother, and she said, yes, he's telling you the truth, but you're only 12. You may change your mind. And she said, so continue to think about it. But she goes, here's what I will commit to you. If you don't change your mind, and the law is still the same, when you're older, you can apply. And then if you're rejected, we'll sue the government. Yeah, I love my mother, too. So the law changed when I was 16. So I applied when I was 17, and then I was in when I was 18. What appealed to me? Probably being in charge appealed to me. And I once heard a women general say, when I grow up, I want to be in charge. I could understand that. But the reason I picked the Navy is I thought it had the most opportunities for women at the time. Whatever I could do in the Army, I could do in the Marine Corps, and then whatever I could do in the Air Force flying, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do once I graduated, I could do in the Navy. So I picked the Naval Academy as my first choice.
Any other questions? Okay. Could you just, so I don't take your head off?
Woo!
Nearly.
Good toss.
So
Sorry.
truly inspirational talk. Do you have any regrets?
No. You know, that's something I thought about years ago. I was probably in my 20s, and I took a weekend off to think about my life and what I was doing. And I suddenly realized I was right here with my life, and that I needed to give myself a bigger metric for success. And one of the metrics I set up for myself was that when I was retired in a rocking chair on my porch, I needed to be able to look back and not have any regrets. And so when I prioritize the now and I prioritize what I'm going to do, I try and put it in terms of, you know, Michelle, 20, 30 years from now, are you going to be regretful you made this decision? And so right now I can honestly say I don't have any regrets. I have a wonderful husband. My mother moved in with us 7 years ago, so she lives with us. I've got great nieces and nephews that I'm in contact with. I have really wonderful friends, and they're my immediate support group. And I've picked and asked to go where I thought would be not just of benefit to me, but to my sailors on the journey. And I feel I don't have any regrets. I'm very, very happy with what I've achieved and what the Navy has allowed me to achieve.
Got time for one more? So, I think the lady there had her hand up first.
I'm
Handoffs
with
work.
at catching things. I lead a technology company, and I'm always being told women aren't interested in technology. Do you get the same thing?
And are those coming from men?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
So what do
Okay,
you
so
say?
there's-
What do you say when you're told women aren't interested in the military?
Well, I tend to push back on opinions with facts. You know, my Navy is 19% women, and I talked to you about, by statute, we were only allowed to be 2%. That didn't change till 67. Our all-volunteer force didn't start till 72. So when I came in 78, we were about 5% women, and we're 19% now. We're at about 58,000 women in my Navy alone. That's bigger than some militaries in some countries. So, and they do everything, particularly the hardcore tech stuff. So, you know, and you look at someone like Grace Hopper. So there's a history there. I try to push back with the actual facts of what's going on. Now, we know there's bias in certain fields. Department of Labor for the U.S. Talks about non-traditional fields for women where less than 25% are represented, and overcoming challenges. You have to get to the point where you have enough women in order to not just have success, but have continued success. So I just tend to push back with the facts. And I'll tell you one quick story. So I was, I think, in third grade, and we had this short assignment from our teacher. What do you want to do when you grow up? And at the time, okay, so I wasn't 12 yet. I did not want to go in the military. I hadn't seen the documentary. I wanted to be a zoologist when I was in the third grade. So I write this essay. I want to be a zoologist. I want to go to Africa. I want to, take care of animals and collect species. And I turned it in, and then our third grade teacher would take each of us aside. And I remember being taken aside, and she goes, "Michelle, such a lovely essay. Women can only be teachers or nurses." And I go, but what about Madame Curie? And she's like, "You can go to your seat now." So the facts are indisputable. And sometimes we just have to push back with the facts of what women have accomplished, what they are, and what's of interest to them. And so if we say women aren't interested in technology, how are we creating the technology so that it appeals to them as a market base and as engineers? And bring that perspective to them. So I can understand, and I want to say thank you for, one, starting your own firm and hanging in there. So I appreciate your leadership in an area where you're a pioneer. Thank you.
I'm afraid that's all we got time for. Admiral Michelle Howard, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not quite sure how to follow that, but I'm going to try. So I'm going to give you a very, very quick, brief overview of what the Innotribe program looks like this week before introducing you to our day anchor, who's actually going to host the rest of today for you. So this week at Innotribe, we've actually decided to theme each of our days. Today is all about identity. Last year at the Future of Money, we said that data was the new oil. Identity is going to be the key to unlocking the power of this. And that's what we're going to dig into today. Everything from identity, business models that are going to come on Wednesday, and business models around identity, but also financial inclusion, how you can include people in that identity going forward. Day 2 is around legacy. It's about building on top of things. It's not just about looking at dusty old servers in the corner of a room. Day 3 around business models is more than just buy new technology and throw it at your existing problems. You don't just innovate in the technology space, you need to innovate in the business model space as well. Understanding the problem means you're going to be able to apply the solution, and that might not always be the latest shiny technology. Adapting your business models can solve your customers' problems. And on day 4, we're going to wrap things up and we're going to look to the future. So rather than going into too many details what's going on, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about before handing you over to our day anchor. And I'd like to invite all of you to join us on Wednesday evening. On the table in front of you, you'll find a few cards here. We're going to put on a networking event to bring together the global community that comes to Sibos with the local technology fintech community that's right here in Canada. If you're interested, we've hired out Ripley's Aquarium, and we invite you all to come along. If you'd like to join us, there's some cards on there. Please pre-register, but if you turn up on the door, we'll let you in as well, and I hope to see you all there. With that, to talk to you a little bit more about today and to start digging into the topic of identity, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our final speaker for this morning, Gela Boskovic.
Thank you all. And my sincere thanks. I'm actually, if you can hear the quiver in my voice, I was incredibly moved listening to Admiral Howard. What a privilege and what an inspiration. So thank you for arranging that. That was phenomenal. Kevin mentioned data is the new oil. And to put some context around why that actually matters and what that means in terms of identity, in terms of future business models, in terms of all of the discussions that we're going to be having here this week, I want to walk you through what identity actually is and what it will be. Data is the new oil, and that data is comprised of transactional, behavioral, and biometric data. All of that is what constitutes our identity in the digital age. So identity actually is going to be the next iteration of capital wealth. I mean that literally. It will be our capital wealth. Your ability to control the privacy, the permissions that you grant for someone to verify who you are, for someone to understand how you transact, how you behave in the digital space, who you are in terms of the privity of the information that is actually tangibly you, your fingerprints, your iris scans, your voice, your gait as you walk. All of that has inherent privity that we as a society have collectively granted a certain amount of privacy to. What we do with those parameters around the privacy of that data as a social construct will actually determine how we calculate and transact capital wealth. All of this data is becoming a new asset class. It is digital liquidity, not to be confused with cryptocurrencies. This is literally how we are going to be able to grant permissions to acknowledge someone's existence, to actually exchange information, which again is the new data, new oil, to actually transact physical goods and services. And lest we forget, corporations are people under the law. They have identities as well. So if we talk about federated identity, portable sovereign self-identity, we have to talk about the complexity of corporate identity as well. All of these things will start to shift the new business model. What matters now is how we frame that out and how we actually grant permission. We are creating a brand new asset class of identities. And believe you me, these things will be securitized and traded. We will bet on their futures, and we will buy them from one another. We have to remember that those who are not included in this digital transformation of this industry also, by inherent virtue, have identity. Those who are not included in the financial system now deserve to be, because their identities have inherent value. And again, if we go back to that notion of the privity of that information that resides in them as human beings, they deserve the dignity and the respect of being included in this system. When we grant them identity, we can actually start to extend financial inclusion. These are the things that we will be discussing. This actually matters. Your ability, again, to keep the privacy and the constraints around who you are and how you interact will be your capital wealth in the very immediate future. This is not something that we think about in 10 years. This is something we have to solve for today. We're going to get a snapshot of that during the discussion of the course of the day. We'll be starting out with something that I have resisted for years and yet have succumbed to eventually because everyone does, the Facebook. And it is the Facebook. So we'll be kicking off our next session, starting out talking about how Facebook knows us better than we know ourselves and how they can tell us what we want. Please stick around for that. Followed by that, we'll actually be talking about the identity of community. FinTech hubs have popped up around the world, and each one of these hubs actually has its own community identity as well. We'll have the privilege of hearing from our Toronto base, but the Canadian FinTech hub in its entirety. Please come back for that. We will also be talking about one thing that we need to. How do we keep the privacy and the parameters and the permissions to ourselves, or how, as we, the custodians of those identities, because that is what the financial service industry will be, the custodian of those identities. How do we put parameters and ring fence around them to make sure that identity isn't stolen? Really critical issue. Please come back for that. And as you can see, we'll also be talking about that last piece of those who deserve to be part of this system and how we can increase the pace of financial inclusion. We'll be talking about biometrics. We'll be talking about hacking. We'll be talking about new technology enabling this. But we need to fundamentally talk about the mission and the critical mission of financial inclusion and why that actually matters. Because as we raise the water for everyone, everyone rises, the whole boat notion. I tried to link in the Navy bit. Clearly it doesn't work. But let me put it this way. The sum of the whole, or the whole, is actually not just greater than the sum of its parts. It is greater because the sum of its parts is increased. That is what financial inclusion will do. That is a critical mission. Please join us for that. And at the very end of the day, we'll actually be wrapping up with a nice little cocktail session out here in the foyer. We'll be talking about making sense of all of this in the context of cybersecurity, which is one of the major themes of this particular session for Sibos. Let me invite you now to take a quick break, grab a coffee, but before you do, I want to let you know what we're going to be doing today. And one of the things that I would ask for you to dig deep into your heart and into your pocket. During the coffee breaks, our baristas will be taking donations for our choice of what we're choosing to support today. As you know, in September, Mexico City was hit by 2 earthquakes, 8.2, and 3 days later, 7.1. We've chosen to take all of those contributions that we gather today through this course of Sibos, that SWIFT will actually match, and donate them to save the children. We're looking at bringing those people who have been most affected by a horrible natural disaster and re-including them in the community that they belong to, but in the global community of support and help. So please dig deep, make your donation. The boxes are out there at the end of the tables. That's your tip. Actually, that's the cost of your coffee, and you know it. Please encourage everyone that also come by to make that donation. So I give you a 15-minute break. We'll be back at the top of the hour to talk about Facebook. Thank you very much for today. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Admiral Howard. Thank you all.
welcome Head of Innotribe.